I agree with you. The worst part is start.
Yeah, it's like,
I have a good feeling about this. I think we're going to do good.
I think it's going to be great. Hey everyone, welcome to the new season of The Art of Outsmarting. I'm Jennifer Rosinski. I'm going to be meeting with Keith over a series of 8 episodes. This is the first one. Keith Mitnik, the man who needs no introduction, he's got a lot more wisdom to share. In the first episode, we're going to be talking about mediation. Keith has some great points to share with you that I think you're going to find really helpful, not only about potentially settling your case, but goals for mediation and how to use mediations as a tool to get better outcomes at trial.
Personal injury cases hinge on the details. ABC Legal, America's most trusted process server, simplifies every aspect of service, so you can focus on winning your clients' cases. ABC Legal-empowered process servers deliver documents nationwide and make 12 million attempts annually, with real-time GPS-tracked updates and proof available online. ABC Legal's simple and transparent services make life easy for your team and help you keep costs under control. Your clients deserve consistent, reliable, and accountable service of process. Sign up for a free account today.
I look forward to another season of Art of Outsmarting. It's hard to believe it's time to start again. This year we did something a little bit different. They did some surveys for me to find out what y'all wanted to hear most about. And most of it were things I would have thought you'd ask for. Some of them were things I didn't expect. You asked for, and we're going to deliver what you asked for. So I really call them this year, you asked for. And we're going to deliver on every one of your requests that were the top ones that most people asked for. I had another idea I had wanted to do, but I'm going to weave it into your request. The underlying concept I have in my mind is being a bodyguard while leading the charge. We lead the charge in the courtroom, and we're putting the evidence on to prove our case. But it's easy to lose sight of the fact one of our most important jobs is to be a bodyguard for our client or for the case. You can be a tip of the spear and still protect the rear. And we have to keep that in mind the whole time. So I had been pre-designing for this until we got the feedback from you. So we're going to make some adjustments on the fly, but I want to keep that in the process here as we go. Always remembering, it's not just proving your case. You have to be a bodyguard, or they're going to wreck your case. So we'll work through that while we work through your request. This year I'm excited because I got Jen Rosinski with me as co-hosting it with me. She has a background that I think is going to make this fantastic. She is one of our top trial lawyers right now, but she's got a history behind her that she worked in PR. She wrote speeches, so she's a natural for this kind of setting. She's a natural in the courtroom. She's got an impressive story in that she started into the law business late. She took her bar exam when she was 30 years old and pregnant with her 3rd child. That's impressive in and of itself. But in a very short time, after having done defense work and tried a lot of cases against us, we recruited her over. And in a very short period of time, she rose up as one of the leaders in our South Florida offices and a partner. And last year alone, she tried 15 jury trials, or running a full caseload for us. And by the way, full caseloads at Morgan is a bunch of cases. And she did all that with having kids from age 8 to 22. So I'm looking forward to having her do this series with me, and I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, Keith. I think this is going to be a wonderful season, not only because of the questions that we've got. I think we have a lot to offer. I'm really looking forward to what you have to say.
Well, I'm looking forward to doing it with you, so let's get started. The first subject, based on what people wrote, is something I would not have anticipated, but I can see why people ask it. It's a really important question. And it has to do with, what are my thoughts on, what are your thoughts on, how do we deal with settlement negotiations, mediations? Mm-hmm. And I'm usually involved late, but I do get called into mediations on some of our cases where they think I can bring something to the table to help push us along. And of course, for many, many years after doing this, coming up on this is 42 years.
Wow.
I did a whole lot of mediations along the way. Mm-hmm. And I do kind of have a unique perspective on it. So, and I'd like to hear yours, because you're more in the weeds of doing settlement negotiations. But let me get started with some of the basic concepts I believe in. And I look at mediations different than a courtroom. Courtroom is where we're really going to battle and showing they're wrong, and it's very confrontational. I think it's a mistake to treat mediation as confrontational. Because if you think about it, have you ever met a defense lawyer who responds well if you're asking them to give you money to you getting in their face?
Right. No. No, doesn't go over well usually.
Why?
Yeah, they don't like it, right? You come in hard, you come in strong, and all of a sudden now they put up a shield and go, hey, listen, we're here to defend this case, and it doesn't always go so smoothly.
And I'm not staring.
Right.
And I got a client sitting here that I need a lot of more business from them. And if you call me to fight, I've got to stand up.
Yeah, always impressing that adjuster.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I tried to surprise them. And number one, I think it's smart strategy. Number two, I really am old school. I do believe until someone gives me no choice on the other side, I show them respect. Mm-hmm. They're in this too, that he earned respect, even if I don't like what they stand for, even if I don't like some of their tactics. Until they really crossed lines with me, I tried to show them respect. But it's really important in a mediation. So my thought in a mediation is this. There are going to be hurdles or obstacles to them paying what you think the case is worth. Most of those hurdles revolve around one thing, competence. They will have points that they're competent in. And they're set in their ways. Insurance companies and adjusters and defense lawyers aren't reinventing the wheel very often. They have categories, and they think of things as categorically. And so there's certain things they have competence in because it's worked for them for many years. So I try to step back before a mediation and say, if I was in their shoes, what would I have most confidence in? And what can I then do once I identify it to diminish their confidence in that point? And if they have 5 points their confidence in, and when we're done, I've shrunk 4 of them, what's that probably going to do to the purse strings? It's going to go up because their confidence is going to go down. The more confident they are, the cheaper they are. The less confident they are, the more likely they're to get reasonable. Mm-hmm. But to get to it, if I come in beating my chest and say, let me tell you, you think this, you're wrong, and I'll tell you why. The defense lawyer hates you, doesn't want to pay you personally. You've now become an obstacle to settlement. And the adjuster doesn't want to pay you. The company doesn't want to pay you. And the defense lawyer now feels they got to show how you're wrong and get just as aggressive and tough. And now you came in already with a gap, and you just made it a huge gap. I want to close the gap. So I typically want to talk to them in a different tone. And the tone is one of mutual respect, matter-of-fact business. And I tell them something like, listen, you got a good lawyer. The case has been worked up well. I'm not going to say anything that you don't already know because your lawyers found out what our strengths are. They got their strengths. And I'm not going to start going down a big list of facts. What I am going to do is something maybe you have heard, which is how am I going to talk about some of your favorite facts, some of the things that give you confidence, and how I'm going to talk to them to the jury. Not to beat my chest. You'll have an answer to them. Your lawyer's good. But I want to give you the perspective out of respect so when you go in your private room, you can talk through it and think, I'm glad he told me that. Information is power. And to make informed decisions, I need to know. And knowing simply facts isn't enough. Knowing what we're going to do with those facts that you have the most confidence in, I think is something may be of value to you. So I'm going to share it with you. And I don't mean to be in your face. And then I start down their list and I say, here are the things you're confident of. And I list. And I will tell them, let me tell you the one worries me the most. I have an answer for it. I'm going to tell you about it. But it's the one, if we lose, it'll probably be that one. Honestly, I'm not worried about these other 4. A little, but not a lot. Let me tell you why. And then I go through them. There's not a lot of visible property damage. Let me tell you what I'm going to tell the jury. I'm first going to get rid of the people for cause who say, if there's not a lot of visible property damage, can't be hurt bad. And they're not going to be on this jury. So the people that are ringers, if things work the way it ought to, they're not going to be there. Then I'm going to talk to them about, it's not about the bending of metal so much as the unexpected awkward jarring that causes these kind of harms, especially in someone 60 years old, got spine that's not all that healthy to start with. And so when I think people start thinking about getting shoved at that age, and they go, boy, that could hurt, I think it's going to be hard to get a lot of mileage out of that. And honestly, I got some other points that I'm going to hold back. I don't want to go too far on that. And then I work through each one of their things. And I say, I know you got responses to it. And I'm not sure my take on it's going to carry the day. I just know it's carried the day many, many times over many, many years. And I just wanted to give you that piece of it. And I'll let him go back.
Do you say that? Like when you're giving these points, do you say, I don't want to give you too much, or I'm not going to say too much about this point because I'm holding it back? Do you actually tell them that?
Yeah, and I do hold it back.
Right.
Let me give you an example. I may or may not hold this back. I may or may not hold back the voir dire one because I don't want to tell them to go argue the voir dire question with the judge. I may or may not hold this one back, but it's a powerful one. You say you're going to take the position directly or indirectly that we can look at this picture and it wouldn't hurt a flea. Except you've hired a doctor you're telling the jury to base their decision on who says it hurt the flea. And there's an internal inconsistency in your position that I'm going to point out in opening statement. And it's hard to then say that wouldn't hurt a flea when your doctor said it caused a sprain. It's not a big injury, it's a little boo-boo, but it's hard to say it wouldn't hurt a flea when you say it did. Now, I probably don't want to tell it that one. So I probably am going to surprise them with that.
Yeah.
But that leads to something else. This is very revealing. And if you're going to not settle, you're hurting yourself. Always say, go to mediation. Do not give them a big PowerPoint unless you think there's a real chance of settle and you need to educate them because this lawyer on the other side isn't telling them straight or isn't paying attention or sugarcoating it. Then give them a PowerPoint. But otherwise, pray they do a PowerPoint and don't give them much. Because if you're not settled, it's a wonderful opportunity to get intel. What they show you in their mediation presentation is like having a granny cam in their office on the weekend before trial, and it helps you prepare to tear their case to hell and back. So listen, don't present unless presenting is going to help. With that basic model, I will often come, if they say we're close, I think we're going to get it settled, then I do that, what I just laid out. If we're in and we don't know, or we think we're probably not, this is a mediation one, and usually you don't settle in one, I don't want to tell them anything. I just listen. So how do you use the strategy if you're not going to use it? How's it useful? I've just told you something worthless. Not really. Because how many times have you been in mediation where you didn't think you'd settle, in 2 hours in you realize we got a real chance to settle?
Yeah, that happens actually. I wish it happened more often than it does. But it definitely happens sometimes where you go in and I'm thinking, oh, this is never going to happen. I'm going to hold back. I'm going to listen more than I'm going to talk. And then the mediator comes in. He's like, hey, they're starting up here. And I'm like, oh, dang.
So what do you do? Here's what I would do and what I've done in the past. I'm changing strategy from keeping my mouth shut to I do want them to hear that because we still got a ways to go, but it's not looking like a realistic chance. But they're reaching the end of the rope, and I need to re-incentivize them. I will ask the mediator, can you now, in the old days, I'd say, can I go in their room with you? And nowadays, I say, can we Zoom me in with them? And I tell them candidly, say, listen, I was holding back because I didn't think there was a chance we were going to settle, and I don't want to help you get ready for trial. But we're making progress here. I don't know where we're going to get there, but I've gone from thinking today's a waste of time to thinking it's a fruitful time. And whether we can close the gap or not, I think may depend in part on some things I may share with you that could affect, it may not, but could affect your confidence in some of your main points. And I'd like to maybe facilitate seeing if we can't close the gap by talking, do you mind? If you don't want me to, I'll hush. And they never say hush. And then I do the same thing I just laid out for them. So you can hold it back, save it, and drop it in when it looks like now we're getting somewhere. And just make those judgment calls as you go. So you're in it all the time. Tell me what you do with settle.
We mediate all the time, obviously. It's required by the court. So sometimes it can be frustrating because you're thinking this case is never going to settle. It's just going to be a waste of time. And sometimes they surprise you. But going in, I always aim to listen more than I talk. That's always pretty much my first goal, especially at Morgan & Morgan. You know, we're very aggressive. A lot of our cases go to trial, and I see mediation a lot of times as more of an opportunity to learn what the defenses are and start preparing for trial. And sometimes, like you said, we go in thinking, okay, this case is going to settle, or I have a really good idea that it's going to settle. I always start, as you said, by complimenting the other side and just keeping an even keel tone, going back and forth. What I do like to do is I like to ask questions, almost like taunting the other side to some extent. They can't help themselves, right? The defense lawyers come in, they've got their adjuster there, sometimes more than one adjuster, sometimes they have their client, and they love to talk about how great their case is. And it's the stuff we hear all the time. They've got a CME doctor, they say it's not related, not a big surprise to anybody. But when they're done with their presentation, I'll ask, well, how are you going to get around this? Well, what are you going to do about this? And I ask questions to try to draw out more information for my own purposes in trial preparation. You know, I'm writing it down, or I'm taking my notes. And meanwhile, when we go to caucus, I start talking to the client about strategies and, hey, how would you answer this? And I use that time almost for some trial prep. Now, if the mediator comes back in and he's got a good number and I'm thinking, okay, this may actually be going the way we want to, I think that's brilliant to start feeding back a little bit more, not everything. And you know, brings me to a good question for you is there anything you absolutely never give up at mediation?
Yeah, it is the surprise. You know, something I'm pretty sure they don't see coming.
Yeah.
And one of them usually is crossfire between their experts. You think they know, they miss it. For example, they've got a radiologist who's playing the game of this is just a bulge. Mm-hmm. And bulges do not come from trauma. And the reading radiologist called it a herniation, but they brought someone in to call it a bulge. And he says, bulges don't come from trauma. Now, if you're really fortunate, we call them CMEs in Florida. In most places, the spine doctor they hire to come in and say it's all aging and no trauma. Occasionally we get lucky and the spine doctor says it is a herniation. Usually they're like bulge versus reading radiologist herniation. Where they're often not aligned is the reading radiologist says that's not trauma, it's a bulge. The spine doctor says, well, it's less likely to be from trauma if it's a bulge, but you can get bulges from trauma.
That's gold.
It's gold, and you're going to blow them up in opening. That's one they usually don't see coming. I don't want to tell them about it. Mm-hmm. So there are things, until I know I'm selling, I hold back. And frankly, even if it's selling, I don't run in and say, by the way, because I don't want them to think about it next time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's stuff you hold back in it. But the other thing is, just as you were talking, I thought, because our model is first mediations are usually not settlement mediations. It's a beginning. You want to get them as high as you can to set the stage for later, and you have to stay high. Because if you start doing serious negotiation in the first mediation, when you're probably not settling, you're hurting yourself down the road, and your chances of settling a fair number go way down. So it takes patience. But that's not every case. There are cases we get into that we like, and something goes south, and we want to settle that case. It's not one we want to go to trial on if we can avoid it. Well, that's the case. I'm going to shoot maybe all of it. I might even give them those pieces that I don't want to, because my goal's different. Yeah. My goal isn't the long game to get a full settlement or I'll see you in trial. My goal is I want to get what I can for this client in fairness, recognizing if we get forced to trial, that's probably not good for any of us. So what do you hold back for? So there is a time you shoot it all. I may shoot some, get them up, and save some to shoot a little later in that mediation, but I don't want it to go to mediation 2. This may be our best shot. Some cases just are gonna be snake bit. So I'm not saying cut and run, but it's smart to realize the case that ought to sell. The danger is, and we've learned it in our models, we've had to change things over the years and how people were set in their ways, It's easy to say every case that's got a flaw is one I didn't want to try. Well, if you do that, you're never trying a case because there isn't a flawless case.
Right.
You've got to set your standards for the case I want to sell, as they've got to be not your typical problems that every one of these cases have. It's got to be something very unique that really does create a near insurmountable hurdle. And you can't set that, if you set that line low, you're doing yourself and your clients a disfavor.
Yeah. I think that some of the questions that we saw come in really focused around that issue of how much information do we give them. And I think that's the key, right, is knowing what your goal is going into that mediation. Is your goal to collect information? Is your goal to settle the case? Is your goal to use it more maybe for a mixture of trial preparation? Ask the questions that you need. Mediation can be such a tool, right? Not just for settlement, but just getting to know the facts of your case. Matt Morgan always likes to say the best time to settle the case is at trial or just before trial, right? And so I guess what advice would you have for people who maybe be too anxious to settle, or maybe having patience and using it more as a tool and just pushing out a little bit longer to help increase the value of their case?
The hardest lesson for me with mediations is patience.
Yeah.
When I can smell the finish line, and it's like, well, if you held out and we do all this extra things, we can get a little more. My mind's like, if we can shut it down, let's shut it down. If it's a little bit of difference, who cares? Let's shut it down. That's wrong thinking. Because for your practice, that little bit adds up to a lot over time with lots of cases. But for that individual client, what may sound like a little bit to you, because we're talking in settlements of bigger numbers, is a big difference for the client. If the net in your client's pocket is $10,000 different, that could be more than they made in a year.
Yeah.
So we have to be patient, even though sometimes intuitively we think it doesn't make sense to wait if we can shut it down because the difference between waiting isn't that much. It is to your client on that case. It is to you in your practice globally. And you start getting a reputation. You're not going to shave. You're going to shave off to get it done at this higher range. Mm-hmm. But you're not, when we're here, going to shave off just to get it done. You're going to shave it off because it's a smart thing and it's a give and take process, not because you lost patience. And that's mine. We get Matt, I will confess, I don't do a lot of the settlement stuff, but I'm in trial, so I get stuck in the middle of it at trial. Mm-hmm. And Matt says, well, let's this, that. I had one, I was out of state, like on the other side of the country. I flew home for the weekend because we had a 3-day weekend. The judge didn't have court open on Monday. And I got to get on and fly 5 hours back. And Matt's holding out for another meeting. But we were talking about lots of millions.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I'll pay the $1 million not to have to get on the plane and fly back. In my mind. But out of respect for what Matt does with these negotiations, and respect for the process, respect for the firm, and respect for the client, I swallowed hard on that. And I was packed up heading to the airport, and that waiting, it blew my weekend at work. I could have sold it for $1 million less on Friday. I worked all weekend. I'm in the car heading to the airport to fly back on Monday. Monday.
Yeah.
Move my flight to get more time. In muttering. I'm the one getting on the damn plane. Guess what? They paid the extra $1 million.
Yeah.
And I was a bit ashamed of myself for even allowing myself to think that. And I told Matt, you're up. So be patient.
Yeah, what a difference for the client, right?
What a difference.
And that's at the end of the day, that's what matters.
It matters. So you have to have the grit to say, I'm not going to jump the gun prematurely just to get it done.
And along those lines, too, is not being afraid to stay at policy limits, especially when you have a mediator who can be somewhat of a bully, right? We've all had that experience where, gosh, sometimes I've had mediators more aggressive than the defense lawyer, and they're like, come down, come down, come down. I think it's important to realize you don't have to come down. You're there for your client. And these are court-ordered mediations. So let's say it's 100 policy, it's a 500 policy, and you know your case is valued at least at those limits. Don't be afraid to go in and say, I'm not moving. I'm not moving. This is the value of the case. This has been our demand. This will be our demand, and it's always going to be our demand. Pay it or don't pay it, or we're done here. And and that can take courage, and it's a little uncomfortable, right? Especially when you've got a mediator. Have you had an experience like that? How do you handle it?
The mediators make you feel like you're doing something
Right?
wrong because it's your turn.
Yeah.
It's your turn, you move. And if you don't, you're dishonest, you're a cheater, maybe you're unethical, but there's something wrong with you. You're not following the model. Here's what I remind myself of. The mediator has a goal, and it's to settle, because settlement's a feather in their cap. And they could care there's some that really care about what's right, but the vast majority could care less about who gets screwed and who gets the better end of this deal. They care about feathers in their caps. And if you're the weak one, you're going to take the beat. If you're not the weak one, they're going to take the beat, and there's no one settle it. What you have to say to yourself is, I didn't come here needing to settle this case. I came to listen, and if we can settle it where it ought to be settled, we're going to settle it. If not, I'm perfectly fine leaving.
Yep.
The more you come in thinking settlement, the more you're going to be under the spell of a mediator who's going to talk you into, he's going to get it done, just trust him or her. Trust them. You have to come into saying, I don't give a damn if we settle down, we're probably not. Mm-hmm. And then you have to be able to tell the mediator, listen, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Save your breath. It's not that, because you got to remember, the mediator not only has a different goal, they're not going to breach your confidence, but they will communicate things they didn't even intend to do through their tone and body language with the other side. They'll say, listen, if you can do this, I don't have any commitments from them, but I think maybe we can get in this range. What do you think the seasoned adjuster and defense lawyer do? They've been talking and they'll go here.
Right.
He didn't breach any confidence, but he told them. It's like poker players and their eyes twitching when they're bluffing. There's a tell. You got to realize you cannot trust the mediators either. Not because they're untrustworthy, because they can't help themselves. And so you need to, it's perfectly fine to tell the mediator, I'm never coming off this. You can come in there 75 times. I'm not coming off this. If you want to get it settled, they're coming to this number. Go back in there. You're wasting your time with me. Well, I want to talk to your client. Fine. I've talked to my client. You know what I tell the mediators also? They want to tell your client stuff to spook them.
Yeah.
I say,
yeah.
Let me say to you, Todd, you don't need to tell my client all the downside. I had told him what you would have said and more, because I take my responsibility to inform them seriously. I've told this, all the shit they want to say. And I said, let me tell you what you probably weren't going to say out of courtesy. I also told them this, and this. You know what else I told them? I lost a case last week in which we left a lot of money on the table. You weren't going to tell them that. Did I tell you that, ma'am? Yes. I said, we've been through it all. There's nothing you're going to tell them I haven't told them. They are fully informed. And what's your decision? I'm not coming off in policy minutes. There you have it. You're not going to get to them. You're not going to get to me. Either let's call it, and I'm fine with it. It's before lunch. Rather than eating your sorry sandwiches out there, I can go get a good lunch down at the Cuban place.
Right.
You can go back and make them pay it, or we can go home. There's a different case I'll have a conversation and I'm going to give and take with you. This isn't it. And I owe it to you to save you time from wasting your time to keep coming in here, because it ain't happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's been one or two times where I've actually just walked out. So we're done here. I'm done. I've made my position clear, and I do it respectfully, right?
Yep.
You know, you go in and you do it respectfully with the mediator, just like you did with the defense lawyer. But and we have great mediators, right? So it's only been a handful of times, but you know, sometimes you just got to be done so your client doesn't get too spooked, because then they're going to be scared of trial, and especially if you have a younger person or somebody who's overly nervous or overly emotional about the process. They can actually do more harm than good at some point, right? So you just got to cut it off.
Get them out.
Yeah. And, you know, and just along those lines of being respectful, You've been practicing for how many years?
I say 41. I'm closer to 42 than 41. Well,
Okay. It's about the year I was born. Fair. Okay. And I mean that with all due respect, Keith. So,
I like being the old Lord. I don't like being the old man, but I like being the old Lord.
yeah, well, you've got the wisdom to show for it.
And
So
that just tricked you a little there.
there you go. Do you, in your experience, see a difference when you go into a mediation, whether or not if that case has a trial date yet? And does that make a difference, and why?
Look, I just have a big one. I think the chances of it settling went down significantly because out of the blue, the judge moved to time certain trial date. And nothing was, a lot of money was on the table, but we needed a lot more. Were we going to close the gap? Don't know. But I know now it's been put off till next year, and I hope we keep moving. But in all likelihood, we are stalled for about 6 months now for one reason, trial date off. You can feel the pressure go out of the room. And remember, insurance companies put their reserves away and earn interest on it. That's how they make their money. So when it's off, why would they say, I'm going to go ahead and put that money that I can earn interest over, and I'm going to take it out of our side and put it on your side of the ledger just for the hell. And what are you going to tell them? You can tell them you sell in the next 30 days or it's off, and it's going up every month after that. You can say that, and you can follow up on it, but they're not going to believe you. Mm-hmm. And so the trial date is the real threat. It's the real threat. And so it's two things. Trial date hovering, coupled with knowing you'll go. You're not scared to go. Trial dates don't mean anything if they know your track record is you won't go. And there are people who say, I doubt they're listening to this, because people listening are honing their skills because they want to go and they want to go more. But there are people who really don't want to go, and that's okay. And you can be in this business or not, but you better have someone who will go.
Right.
Yeah. Bring someone in or refer it out if it doesn't settle. Have a plan that I'm okay even though I'm not going. I hope everybody listening says I'm going to be the one to go. And because being scary is a big part of settlements. And being scary doesn't just mean you're the greatest trial lawyer that came along. That's part of being scary. Getting older and more experience and building, having a resume, and you're building your resume, you're scarier than you were 10 years ago. I'm scarier than I was, 30 years ago. And that adds value. But it's not the only path. You don't have to try a bunch of cases to be scary. You can be scaredy by the package you put together. Remember, we started this thing about 30, 40 minutes ago. I said I come in and take their confidence away by showing them things they have competence in that fits in their preset categories. I know these are the things we win on, and show them you may win with other people, but not with me because I've figured it out. Mm-hmm. You don't present it, I've figured your fraud out. That doesn't work at mediation. You will expose the fraud at trial, but at mediation you do it not in that way. But when you come to them and say, you're going to say, my client didn't go to the emergency room. They asked if they needed him, said no. In fact, they told the defendant, I'm okay. I know you have great confidence in that. I know you're going to tell the jury that shit they weren't hurt seriously. I just want to tell you what I'm going to say in response to that, and you can process it however you want. I'm going to tell the jury, no, my client didn't go to the emergency room because it wasn't a medical emergency. She wasn't bleeding to death, wasn't having a heart attack. She didn't have bones sticking out of her leg. She had what starts out feeling like a sprained strain. That's why they usually diagnose that at the emergency room to that. They're stiff, they're sore, they're rattled. They think they're going to be fine, and they got other responsibilities. Got to pick the kids up. They got to do something. Mm-hmm. And they don't race to the emergency room because it's not a medical emergency. But when the soreness they thought would be gone in a couple of days is getting worse, not better, then they go to a doctor. And they treat conservatively. When they say it should have been gone by now, sprained strain, they say, I want to go send you to get a MRI just to make sure. And they get the bad news, this wasn't a sprained strain, you damaged a disc. And it's a very serious problem. That was the evolution of that. And that's what I'm going to explain to the jury. So you're going to feel like, boy, they didn't go to the emergency, must not be hurt. But when they have that context, I'm going to ask you, Don't answer me, please. I'm just going to tell you because I'm going to say these kind of things to the jury. Would you run to the emergency room if you thought you were just stiff and sore and go there with all them sick people in 6 hours and all the money it costs when you thought you're going to be better in a few days? And I'll ask you this, because I'm going to ask the jury this. If they did, what would you think? You think
that's
they're
scary.
Show.
That's scary.
Just scared the shit out. And I could have scared the shit out of what I had on my hair and it was too long and they thought I was a punk. Because those words, the package, the experience, your resume can be scary. But at the end of the day, they know they beat scary lawyers like me. And they lose to lawyers that are young all the time. Mm-hmm. They know that package that they're counting on. When you take it away,
Yeah. And the way you just presented that, you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be in their face. You just say it with authenticity. And you say it with truth and as a matter of fact. It's not a question. This is how it's going to be. So you make the decision.
Sure, but at the end I say, and I'm telling you that because I don't want you to have the typical confidence you have when they didn't go to the emergency room, they didn't see a doctor for 3 weeks, and you think that's going to carry the day. And it might.
Sure.
With certain jurors, it still will. I can say it any way I want, it won't matter. But you can't assess in fullness if all you have something that you feel good about and you don't have what I'm going to say that I think gives a good chance of taking the feel good away. Mm-hmm. In fact, I believe it's going to I'm going to tell the client, I'm going to tell the jury an opening statement. And I'm going to present some evidence to you and show my client is not putting on show for a lawsuit. My client, if she was putting on a show for a lawsuit, would have said, take me on the ambulance and make sure you not only have the fractures going, I want the
neck brace,
Yeah. My client said to your client, the person that hit him, my client said, no, I'm okay. Does that sound like someone who's putting on a show and faking it, exaggerated? I think it's a hard sell with that.
Yeah. And that goes back to like your book, Eat the Bruises, and how you put things in context. You've got to come right up front with that and take away their weak spots, and not only at trial, but at mediation, right? When it's appropriate and depending on what your goals are. Because it sounds like when you've implemented these types of strategies, you've had better results. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
At trial and at mediations when you bring those things out. Mm-hmm. You know, I do them in med-mal cases. You know, I had a case in a med-mal case where we held this map. We did not use it because we knew they weren't going to set. Mm-hmm. But if I thought it was a case and by the way, we won it, I didn't try it. I helped frame it, wanted to try it. I was out in Wyoming trying a product case that I was already committed on and couldn't go to the med-mal. I wanted to go. We got a really good verdict on it. And the facts were very concerning. The lawyers called me, said, I want to talk to you about this. And I said, well, my first audit, I don't want to go on that one. Right. And then I got talking. I went, yes, I do. And I was heartbroken. I couldn't go, all from a packaging with facts. And I'll give you the story because it fits this mediation. It was this, the person had a valve surgery. They went in to do a single valve. As they got in, they found more valve problems and they had to do all 4 valves. So it was a very complicated surgery. On top of that, our client had a list this long of medical health problems, put them at high risk for a bad outcome. So they were a complicated patient, a high-risk patient who got an unexpectedly very complicated surgery.
That's tough.
And died.
That's
so
tough.
Guess what the defense is? High-risk patient, complicated surgery, and now we're getting sued. What are we supposed to do? We did our best. It was doomed. She was doomed. That's a hard case. It was so bad that we were having our lawyers were battling over life expectancy. And it wasn't 10 to 20 years. It was the difference between 7 and 9 years. I said, drop our expert, split the difference, or give them their 7 years. The last thing we want the trial to be about 2 half-day experts about how our client's about to die. Mm. So drop it. But anyhow, we talked through it. And I'll give you the end, what we ended up with. Now think about mediation. Had they thought these were reasonable people would have settled, you could have done this, and I bet you got to get settled. We just had pig heads working to settle, so we put them less at trial. Mm-hmm. But Feel how bad that felt.
Yeah.
Now let's repackage it and see how something they had ultimate confidence in became something scary to them, or at least would have knocked their confidence to hell back. Yes. We tell the whole story. The lady needed the surgery, blah, blah. Then you get to the end of it, we say, to make matters worse. My client was not someone who was in great health and could, I got to give a piece of facts in. They did a EKG in recovery, and it was showing some stuff that could say you're having a bleed. Could be scary. However, after major heart trauma from the surgery itself, you can have those as just a abnormality that's from surgery. It's not a bleed. In fact, the likelihood was it was not a bleed. It was just an abnormality. And our smoking gun is you had all of this and didn't go do a cath. Their response is, we're not going to go do a cath on someone just had 4 valves replaced because of something that's probably nothing, because a bunch of plaintiffs' lawyers say that's what we should have done. Scary ass case.
It doesn't sound great to me.
Here's how it gets flipped. This is the package you can deliver at trial. You also, in the right situation, deliver at mediation. We go through the whole thing. They had these things. It could have meant she's bleeding. Probably didn't, but could have. Couldn't rule it out. Now, to make matters worse, though, they didn't just have this EKG that had what could have been a real life and death alarm. Probably a false alarm. It wasn't your typical patient. She wasn't healthy enough to wait and see.
That's brilliant.
Here's what the evidence is going to show. She was a very complicated patient. If you wait and see and it turned out it wasn't a false alarm, there would be 0 chance of her surviving. Her only chance would be to go get an answer now, because she wasn't going to make it if you let her bleed out for another day, which is what they did. But to make matters even worse, this was not just a high-risk patient where you didn't have the luxury to wait and see. This wasn't just a 1-valve surgery. It turned into very complicated 4 valves. You know what means every valve they do? They got a needle, and they got scissors, and they cut a valve, and they sew a valve. Cut, cut, cut. Needle, needle, needle. What does cut, 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 needle, needle, needle do? Every valve increases the chance of bleed. They didn't have the chance once, not twice, not 3, all 4. So with all those chances that this really was a bleed, and a patient who couldn't wait and see, guess what they decided to do? Put on rose-colored glasses and wait to see if she died from a bleed. So I want to sit down and see how they're going to explain how they waited and chose to wait and see with not a healthy patient, but a very high-risk patient, and not a straightforward surgery, but a very complicated surgery. Now, they did that, though. Guess what the hell they didn't owe me? Shifting payments. Because the thing they were building their whole case on became our best buy.
And how do they get up and reply to that? It's
They got up and said, well, they say this, but let me tell you about it. And they whispered. But I did it to somebody in a mid-mile one time. They waited so long to do opening. The judge said, gentlemen, if you're going to give your opening, now would be the time. Because they didn't know what to do with it. It was a different kind of case. They did the same thing. My point in all that isn't showing off. It's showing the process of packaging. When you hear a fact and you go, cut and run and settle. Not going to try that. Don't do it. There's some facts are that. My client got caught in 17 lies. They said I'd never had surgery in my life on my back, and they had surgery a month before the before the crash. Guess what? They didn't forget. You got a problem. I don't have an answer to that one. Settle that one.
right.
But so many of the things we react badly to, if we go, I believe we're right. I believe they're wrong. Let me figure out what's wrong with why they're making it look like we're wrong. Be patient with it. Don't scare off with it. Work the problem. When you do, there's almost always an answer. And when you have the answer, now you have something very scary to them. And you can choose when to use it. If it's a chance of settlement, unveil it. If it's not, save it. If you saved it and you're into your second mediation and now, to your surprise, we're within striking distance, then unravel it. And if it never does, save it and bust their ass in opening. When you do it in opening? At the very end of your opening. You say, to make matters worse, don't give them time to regroup. Drop it in their lap and let them jump up, see how quick they are.
Right. Yeah, because they'll get up all scripted. They can't switch that quickly.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
They can't.
it's a beautiful thing.
You don't have to have 15 trials in 1 year with a bunch of, I know, I keep reading the emails, all your 7 verdicts on cases most people would be happy with 250,000. You don't have to be Jim. You don't have to be old man Mitnik to be scary. What I just packaged in and of itself scary. You can be scary when you're young. You can be scary when you're building a reputation and a legacy by respectfully presenting things that take competence.
Yeah. And in terms of presentation, we're talking about being scary and having patience. I find too that using that voice inflection, the purposeful pauses, even I know we're all on Zoom now, with the hands, that makes a difference. That presents you as being scary if you're not a very scary person. Like, I wouldn't think I'm a very scary person, but sometimes it's all about the way you say it. And are there
Scariest people are the ones that don't look and act scary.
There you go. Are there instances where, we're in the Zoom era now, where you think it would be more beneficial to do something in person, to have that one-on-one, face-to-face interaction with the defense or the adjuster? And along those same lines, like demonstratives, how far would you say to take a mediation in your experience?
Again, are you going to settle or not? If every time you push them closer to settle them, you're giving something up, you're giving them get the peek behind the curtain at what you're going to do to them at trial. And if you think you can, I tell you what I don't like. I don't like the classic PowerPoint mediation presentation. It's just a walkthrough. Here's what this expert said. Here's what this says. Here's what this says. Here's what this says. And it's just basically like you're telling the story to the jury in a PowerPoint. The problem is the defense lawyer knows the story. The adjuster may not. Look, sometimes you have the lawyers that aren't informing adjusters at all, and they need to know the whole story, like they were telling them from day one. Then present that if it is. Most of the time you got a mediator that knows at least the basics of the story. Mm-hmm. You know what I've sat and watched so many times, because now at this point in my career, I don't put on the mediations. I sit and I say, I'm going to listen, and at the tail end, if I think there's value, I'm going to say something. Yep. But the lawyer whose case of this is doing the presentation. I have watched very impressive detailed presentations while watching on all the little Zoom boxes the defense lawyers and the adjusters. And you know what they're doing? Looking at the front. And they look at each other and they're like, they're bored. Mm-hmm. They're like, you're a rookie. Why are you doing this? You're wasting my time. They're losing respect. They're getting more competent. So what do you show them? Something they weren't thinking about. You say, I don't know if you realize this, but your doctor that you hired said, my client's not a malamber. Here it is, in black and white. And they didn't face him. By the way, this has got nothing to do with mediation, but here's a little tidbit for you. If you get their spine specialist they went and hired to say, I didn't see any evidence of Ms. Jones' malamber, don't stop there, because there's an answer to that. You're going to get up in opening and say, they're suggesting my client's exaggerating or putting on. They hired someone who saw absolutely no evidence of it. I've done that to them and then found out through hard knocks there's a little way to wiggle out.
Yeah.
Here's the wiggle out. Yeah, that's just based on the 30 minutes they were together with him. When they say that, add this into your deposition. And you're basing that both on your face-to-face and all the records you review. Yes, that little answer changes everything. Because now they could say every single one of the records before this crash and after that the defense lawyer is going to put up and suggest that she was not hurt that bad, that she's exaggerating, that she's a lot better than she's saying. Their doctor not only met my client, reviewed every single one of those records they're going to put up for you. And guess what he concluded? Zero evidence of faking or exaggerating.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Zero. And remember this, what the lawyers say isn't evidence. But the person they hired and said, you better listen to him, says that ain't so. You do the same thing with a prior. They were in a crash before. Defense is going to make a big deal out of it. They were in a crash before. Look at this. This was a much worse crash. They were totaled their car. This one's just a fender. Their doctor, they hired. They want you to count on it. They hire all the time. They paid a lot of money to. Guess what he says about that crash? Didn't hurt a flea. Says this didn't hurt a flea either, but neither did that one. They just say the flea didn't get hurt. Or they say just a sprain strange. They're not saying these injuries. They say it's aging, not that crash. I don't know why the lawyer's going to talk about it when the person they say to listen to says that has nothing to do with this injury. Nothing.
Yeah.
So my point is, when you go through all of those things, you gather that information. If you have something like that, and you're not holding it back, and I would caution, that's the kind of thing I typically would hold back. But if you think it's worth doing because I think we can fail, that's something you could show. You can put up, here's the answer from the transcript. And folks, if you think you're going to get out of that, now see, I'm getting a little aggressive. And I know you may, when you get back in the room, take some comfort by saying, yeah, but that was only based on the little bit of time together. Well, I want to tell you what I'm going to show the jury. We followed up and said, and that's based on all the records. So every time your lawyer puts up a record to suggest my client's exaggerating, your doctors refute it and reach the opposite conclusion. And it's not your lawyer's fault. The guy, you probably wished he hadn't said, but it's in black and white. You can't get out of it. And I think that changes that whole idea of my client's exaggerating. If you were banking on that in your decisions here today, I just want you to know the other side of the story on that, because I'm going to do my level best to take that away from you. And based on past experience, I think I'm probably going to that for sure.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I'll say on mediation from a defense perspective, you talked about the PowerPoints and going through tediously telling all those little details. I agree. I think that's boring as heck. But what I will say is, as a defense lawyer, a lot of times we go in not even knowing the case that well, not having the information. The adjuster's not that well informed. And we know adjusters come in and they've got their authority, right? They're coming in, they've got 15K, 20K, whatever it is. A lot of times as the defense lawyer, some of that stuff I'm hearing for the first time. And not tedious every little detail, but sometimes I would come in as a defense lawyer and not know about, hey, this injection or whatever it is. And I find on this side that what's important is making sure the defense knows what's going on. And every case is different, right? You're gonna have different quality defense lawyers, different quality cases. But once you're sure that they know what's going on, and let's say it's a policy case, always do a demand after mediation. If you don't settle there, do a PFS, a proposal for settlement, make a time limit demand, because that gives the adjuster time to learn the facts at mediation and then get the authority for the limits once they have that additional information. A lot of times that will work, and sometimes the mediator will come and say, hey, the adjuster doesn't know, or they have questions or whatever it is, and usually that's a good sign that the defense lawyer just wasn't doing his or her job.
See, that's interesting. I'm glad we're doing this, because I never did defense work. So you're given a piece that I'm going to factor that in myself. I'm glad you shared that, because while I'm there like get to it, the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Don't put extra BS in there that wastes people time and bore them, but don't be scared to present the key facts quickly, sharply, because the other side, I'm assuming, knows it all, and maybe I'm assuming given.
Yeah. And a lot of times they will, right? But I'm telling you, a lot of times those defense lawyers are super overworked, and they don't know the case as well as you think they do or assume they do. And we come in as plaintiffs lawyers thinking, oh, they know all this stuff and they're just putting this minimal amount on the table, when in reality, they just don't know. They just have no idea. And so that's the importance too of not coming off limits, because adjusters may not have the authority on that day. And so it's really important to always follow up with a PFS or a time limit demand after you've made that presentation, after you've put things in context, so that you're giving them that last opportunity, right, to do it before you really take that case to trial.
You just gave another way to be scary while being pleasant. And that is, if that adjuster's in the room, doesn't know the case well, and realize their lawyer doesn't know the case well, and knows the opposing lawyer knows the case well,
Yeah.
that's got to rattle their confidence a little. So this has been really helpful.
Yeah.
This was our first one. I had a sneaking suspicion it was going to flow and work well. It's proven to be true. I can't wait to do the rest of the season.
Yeah, it was great. Looking forward to it, Keith. Thanks. That was great information. I hope you all found it useful. How to be patient but respectful and also scary at the same time. It's good stuff. The next episode is going to be evidence analysis. Keith will be discussing things with you like strategies for depositions, preparing your case for trial, motions in limine, really about being a bodyguard for your case and building that treasure chest of tools that's going to make you most successful.